Hello and welcome to another episode of the African Football HQ podcast. I'm Malek Shafei and I'm joined by Ed Dove. How are you, Ed?
Pretty good, Malek. Excited about Ligue 1 being back. Enjoyed the conclusion of the Champions League. And as always, looking forward to another episode of African Football HQ. How are you doing?
Yeah, I'm good. I did not get to watch the final, unfortunately, but what were your thoughts on it?
It was tight. I thought PSG did quite well to neutralise Bayern. I thought they could have been a little bit more adventurous, trying to capitalise on that high line. It was disappointing for them because I'm not sure. I'm not sure exactly when they'll be back in the final. It's taken them such a long time to get there. I was kind of hoping that they could maybe get over the line. But anyway, in today's episode, we are going to be looking back not just over the final eight, but over the whole of the Champions League. We're going to be looking back over the African contribution to the competition. We're going to be picking out some of our key performers from the continent in a series of categories that Malek and I have drawn up. Malek, where should we start? Should we start at the top?
Yeah, I think the easiest one is best player, just to go over.
Let's not go for the easiest one. Let's go for the most interesting one.
All right, what do you think?
I want to get the bad stuff out of the way first. I want to talk about disappointments.
That's fair.
I want to talk about the players who've let us down during this campaign, to be honest.
All right, I'll start. It's more of a general one about Liverpool and their African players. Mohamed Salah, Sadio Mane, a little bit of Naby Keita. I don't know how much you could blame it just on them, or whether it being the whole team. Obviously, Atletico Madrid played a great two legs against them, but you would have expected them to go further in the round of 16, wouldn't you?
Yeah, that was disappointing, especially considering both how they were doing domestically, but also how they'd done in Europe over the last two seasons. It's quite rare you get a team who conquer Europe so almost twice, really, before conquering their domestic league. But obviously, this season for Liverpool was all about getting over the line in the Premier League. I mean, obviously, you're disappointed with Liverpool overall, but are you disappointed with how the African players performed?
Throughout the competition, Mane and Salah put in some great performances, although a lot of them would be against lesser teams like Red Bull Salzburg or Genk. So if they don't show up and perform against where it matters, against an Atletico Madrid, how would you evaluate their performance over the entire tournament? That's the main question. And, it's someone like Choupo-Moting, who had really great goals in arguably the most important part of the season besides the final. Does that rate more than a Neymar scoring a bunch over smaller teams in the group stage?
Yeah, I think you saw a bit of a lack of control from Liverpool in the group stage compared to in the Premier League, where there weren't a lot of resounding wins. They were kind of narrow wins, but they were in control a lot more and they were eking out results. Whereas I don't know if you remember the 4-3 victory over Salzburg in early October when Salah scored twice. A really fantastic performance from him. Obviously got lost in the context of the season, but I think there were performances like that where they, with a bit of a reshuffled side, they showed their weaknesses and their vulnerabilities a little bit more.
Definitely. Do you think part of it had to do with maybe Naby Keita getting more playtime? Is he ready for Champions League football with Liverpool?
I think he made 4 appearances maybe during the group stage. I think 4 or 5. I think he's definitely ready. He really impressed me when he was playing in the knockout stage for Liverpool just before he got injured last season. And I don't think there are any doubts really about his contributions in the continent. The concern has been whether he can string it together consistently in the Premier League. I agree with you, Liverpool have been disappointing, but I just hope that next season, now that they've got the Premier League out of the way, they've got that duck off their back, if you want, they can now start they can focus back on Europe. Because as I was saying, for a team like PSG or Man City, they don't have that belief within that squad, or they didn't until PSG didn't until this season, that they can actually win those big European nights, get over the line. Whereas Liverpool do have that. They've already proven they can do it. They've twice reached the final under Klopp, and particularly Mane during the season when they were defeated by Real Madrid, and then also memorably in that victory over Bayern Munich away from home in March 2019. He really proved that he is at his level in the knockout stages, the business end of the Champions League. So I expect Liverpool to come back strongly next season.
Definitely. The fact that they went out in the round of 16 and are already expected to be a contender for the next year's competition shows how strong they are as a club. And I do agree with you. Those performances, especially against Bayern last year, I feel like they do go under the radar when you think about how they finished the Premier League season or just looking at the Champions League final. So I think when we look back on that side in a few years, and we'll be able to retrospectively look at Mane's performances, Salah's performances, and hopefully Keita's in the future. And also Matip too will be able to respect that a lot, I think.
For me, in terms of disappointment, I'm going to go for Galatasaray. I think obviously Galatasaray got a difficult group stage draw with PSG and with Real Madrid, and they did only lose narrowly against those two at home. But away from home, they were just smashed. And guys like Feghouli, guys like Belhanda, Mario Lemina, Seri, I love the look of that team. I love what they're doing week in, week out in Super League. And I'd hoped that they would be a bit more competitive and they wouldn't. I hope that they'd at least take more from Club Brugge, sneak into the Europa League and avoid the kind of hammerings that they got against PSG and Real Madrid. And this was not an exceptional Real Madrid side. And so that was a bit disappointing. And also, I know you're going to say this is a little bit harsh, but Nordi Mukiele's semi-final performance for Leipzig against PSG and his error in the build-up to that Juan Bernat goal. I mean, I know we've praised a lot of the kind of younger African players, particularly at Leipzig, for how they've coped with the knockout stages, but I thought that was a performance that was maybe a bit of a reality check for Mukiele, I'm afraid.
Yeah, well, he's a young player, and just at that stage, you can't expect him to get everything right. But from what he's shown so far, I think you'll agree. The Africans they have in the back, they're set for the few years if they don't leave.
Yes, and on that note, I want to move on to our next section, which a bit of a Leipzig theme for me at least, is the underappreciated, underrated performance of the tournament, of the competition from an African player. I'm going to go first, sticking with Leipzig. I'm going to go for Dayot Upamecano and his performance against Atletico Madrid in that quarterfinal. It was a real... Listen, Leipzig were class against Tottenham in the round of 16. I think a lot of people expected that they would come up short against Atletico, this chiseled side who know how to get the job done in the European Cup knockout stages. But his performance against Diego Costa, his control, his composure with the ball at his feet, his anticipation, his reading of the game. The thing that struck me about Upamecano this season is that there almost hasn't been a moment when you've been able to tell or perceive his inexperience at this level. He has looked like he's been playing Champions League football for years, and that's the sign of a really exciting defender and someone who I think within a year or two will be playing at one of the biggest clubs in the world.
Yeah, he's been recently perceived as a Rolls Royce of a centre back. Fast, good in the ball, does everything right. A season ago when he was linked to Arsenal, we talked about this last week, but a lot of their fans weren't happy with the move. They didn't rate him too highly, but a lot of that will definitely change. I don't think a move will come this summer, but I think this next season he'll definitely be able to impress a lot.
Yeah, a lot of players, I think, look very composed and in control in their own, or can look very composed and in control in their own domestic top flight. And so we can label them as you said, a Rolls Royce of a defender, but it's another thing to do that against Tottenham, to do that against Atletico Madrid in the knockout stages. And I think the knockout performances for Leipzig have really lent weight to the hype that surrounded Upamecano. What about for you, your underappreciated or underrated performance of the competition?
I'm going to give it to Nigerian forward Emmanuel Dennis when Club Brugge drew Real Madrid 2-2 at the Bernabeu. It happened really early in the season, October 1st, so a lot of us have probably forgotten it, but Club Brugge took a 2-0 lead. Dennis had kind of two similar goals, two chips, one of them assisted by Percy Tau, and just imagining that, a Nigerian scoring two goals at the Bernabeu is incredible, but unfortunately they weren't able to hold out for the win.
Yeah, it was a really coming-of-age performance from him as well. And he's someone who latterly we've seen him being linked to Inter Milan. We've seen him linked to Arsenal, I think even Manchester United. Do you think he's someone, from what you saw, do you think he's someone who's ready to make the move to one of Europe's big leagues? Or would you like to see him at Club Brugge for another year or two?
Definitely. No, especially considering that performance was almost, I think, 10 months ago. So clubs must have been scouting him in the meanwhile, even though the Belgian league has stopped recently. Uh, this summer, I don't know. It's probably a bit too late. We heard him linked a lot with almost everyone earlier in the summer and during the spring, but I guess in a similar position to some of the other players, we might have to wait till next season.
Yeah, I think Bruges are automatically in the group stage for the 2020-2021 Champions League. So I think he'll get another opportunity to test himself against Europe's best this season, and I think probably that's what he needs. Next, let's look at breakout stars. So we're looking at players who have taken their game to another level, have entered the public psyche, or have changed the broader global perception of themselves during their performances in the tournament. Anyone who stands out for you in this category?
For me, it has to be Lyon midfielder Hosam War. Just he's been highly rated for so many years, but this season he was finally able to really take Lyon far, and he was at the forefront of their midfield.
Yeah, it was strange this season because he's always been kind of seen as a younger head in what has always been a young side. Lyon recently have always kind of turned to youth and turned to the academy, but this season he really felt like one of the elder statesmen in that team. Partly because obviously he has been around longer than some of the other guys, considering the departures, considering the players who have moved on, but also just the way he was taking responsibility, the way he was really asserting himself in the big matches. Obviously, people are going to talk about that remarkable Man City game. But I think, yeah, he's a player that delicious left foot. I love the way he can step between kind of a deeper role where he keeps things ticking over. He keeps the blood flowing through that Lyon midfield, but also how he can then step forward to the edge of the box and play those through balls and unsettle defenders and make something happen.
Yeah, I feel like well-rounded wouldn't be good to describe him. It's like he's good at everything almost. He basically eliminated Cristiano Ronaldo's Juventus in the round of 16, which I think is very impressive for a young player, considering he assisted one of the crucial goals. But clubs are going to be after him. We've heard about it a lot, but I think that what we really need to talk about is, will he be one of the world's best midfielders in a few years? Do you agree?
Um, I don't know. I mean, there are a lot of very excellent midfielders in that kind of 23 to 19 age bracket, and he's 22 now. And he had last season in France. I think he maybe got 4 assists, and his numbers. And he was playing for a fairly limitedly on side who were flattered by their performance in the Champions League. I think obviously things have improved for the team once Rudy Garcia came in. But in terms of just our performance, he was much more influential the season before. I think he had a hand in over a dozen goals in Ligue 1. And yeah, it's interesting how he's perhaps come to greater prominence actually in a season when he hasn't been at his best, when Lyon have had a bit of an off year. So I don't know. It'll be interesting to see if Man City move him now. I think he would step into that kind of Gundogan role in the midfield. But if he remains at Lyon, considering the kind of complexion of Liga, I don't know. I don't know. I don't know if he is going to get there if he doesn't kind of make that next step quickly.
So who would you say is your breakout star?
For me, I'm going to go. I know you're not going to be happy with this one. You're going to have a few complaints, but I'm going to go for Ashraf Hakimi. And I know. We already knew a year ago that he was a class act, and I know that we already saw at the World Cup and last season for Dortmund just what he offers. However, I don't think anyone expected he would score 4 goals in the Champions League group stage. I don't think any African players actually scored more than him in the Champions League this season. And
I think Salah is tied with him.
Yeah, those performances for Dortmund, particularly against Inter, we just saw this kind of rampaging, Cafu-like train of a fullback powering forward, causing problems in the final third, unsettling defenders, getting in behind the fullback, and like a few of the other players we've talked about so far, I think he's someone who looks like he was born to play at this level. Obviously, that's led to the move to Inter Milan, the next chapter of his career. And I think that's why I'm kind of getting away with considering him a breakout star, because we have seen Hakimi in the Champions League take his game to a new level. We've seen new elements. Do you think I can get away with that, naming him as a breakout star, or is it a little bit?
He literally broke away from defenders with his speed. Like physically, he's at the top level. There are very few that are faster than him. And so in a lot of his goals and assists that you watch him play, he's making these like half field length runs and assisting a goal, which is incredible. But it does bring up the question, you do that. You can do that against weaker teams that play a high line, but against maybe a stronger team, against the PSG, who they failed to defeat, or had they progressed later rounds, would he still be able to be as impactful?
Well, that's going to be the test next season in Serie A, and I think he'll be a lethal weapon for Inter in the Champions League. Obviously, they've qualified with Juventus, Atalanta, Lazio, and I'm really looking forward to seeing him build on his performances that he in Europe's Premier Club competition next season.
Yeah, I do have to bring up, though, it's a bit unfair that we most recently criticized Liga and the Bundesliga for not being that strong when their 2 clubs did make the semifinals. Their 4 clubs made the semifinals.
I haven't criticized those 2 leagues. Maybe you have.
Subconsciously.
I know you like sticking the knife in here and there, and I know you like looking down on the little guys, but not me. I will blow the trumpet for Liga until the cows come home.
Well, speaking of blowing the trumpet for smart leagues or clubs, let's talk about the player of the tournament from a non-big side. Obviously, the Champions League is known for the big Borussia Dortmunds, Paris Saint-Germain, Manchester Cities, but there's also Eastern European sides like Red Star Belgrade, Slavia Prague. Brings up a lot of interesting matchups, and there are a lot of African players
Czech Republic,
playing.
not Eastern Europe. I've got to stop you there. Czech Republic is Central Europe.
I'm sorry. Thank you for that.
I know it's an African podcast, but we've got to get our European geography right on here.
I appreciate that. I've lost my track a bit, but there are a lot of African players who are playing for these smaller clubs. So are there any who you would like to highlight first, Ed?
Yes, I'm going to go for a team who are not in Eastern Europe. You may consider them to be in North Africa. I'm going for Red Bull Salzburg and the performances of Zambia's Enoch Mwepu in midfield. Absolutely love what I saw from him during the group stage. Obviously, Salzburg didn't progress to the knockouts, but he got 3 assists. I think he was defensively very astute. He operates as a classic box-to-box midfielder on occasion. Against Liverpool in particular, a lot of eyes were on him in that match against the reigning champions. He was unfazed. He looked good with the ball at his feet. He stepped up to the challenge. What I really liked, obviously, kind of the stereotypes about African defensive midfielders and the kind of lazy stereotypes that are trotted out. But actually what we saw a lot of the time from Mwepu was his ability to actually come out of tight spots with the ball at his feet, to use the ball intelligently, to evade the press. The anticipation was there, the timing was there. Sorry, I could go on and on about this guy. I was really impressed with what I saw from him, and I'm looking forward to seeing him back in the Champions League with Salzburg, of course, with Patson Daka, his compatriot.
I was just about to say, Daka is really impressive as well. We didn't get to see too much of him in the Champions League, but next season, I think the full lights will be on Daka and Mwepu for their Zambian stars at Red Bull Salzburg.
Yeah, and I think obviously this year in the Champions League didn't exactly go to plan for them. But finishing third ahead of Genk, getting into the Europa League, and those performances, getting results against the likes of Liverpool and Napoli, I think that'll stand them in very good stead. And these young guys will, even that 4-3 defeat we mentioned before at Anfield. Imagine what a learning experience that is for players. Imagine how much stronger you feel going back into the Austrian Bundesliga, having taken Liverpool to close to a victory, close to taking a point at Anfield. I think these are the kind of experiences that will really bolster and embolden these players moving forward. And what about for you?
We want to say we talk about weak leagues, but unfortunately, the Austrian Bundesliga is pretty low quality when you look at Salzburg's quality to the rest of the league. Some of the score lines, they're incredible. Their goal difference is absurd. So I feel like these performances kind of prepare them only for the Champions League, and if they were to move to a bigger club. But I feel like at the Austrian Bundesliga,
I don't know. I'm not sure I agree with that. I think what we saw from Lask against Manchester United in the Europa League was very impressive, and I think the likes of Sturm Graz, the likes of TSV Hartberg, the likes of WSG Wattens, and of course Wacker Modeling. I think these sides that are growing, they can cause trouble for Salzburg in the future.
Can't tell if you're sarcastic, but I'll move on to my player. It is Nigeria's Slavia Prague forward Peter Olayinka, sorry. He scored in his debut, and I'm going to ask you a bit of a trivia question. Who was the most recent Nigerian before him to score in his debut? It was in the year 2002.
In the Champions League?
Yeah.
Was it Yakubu?
Wow, incredible. Do you know how many goals he scored that game?
He scored a hat-trick in that game, Malek.
It was very impressive. I just saw that in a tweet, so I thought I would save that to quiz you, but you had that covered.
You can't get Nigerian striker questions past me.
Well, yeah, he had a really weird story. He born in Nigeria, but he came to Albania as like a 16-year-old. Now he's 24, playing in the Champions League. So his journey you couldn't call it the top really, but to where he is now, to playing against some of the big clubs in the Champions League, and then once he gets there to score at a decent level, but he also scored a good level at the Europa League, is very impressive in my opinion.
Yeah, and you mentioned that debut goal against in the group stage against Inter. It was away at Inter, I think. And actually in that match, Inter only rescued a point because they scored through Nicola Barella in stoppage time, right at the very death. So he was actually seconds away from securing one of the all-time great Slavia Prague European victories away at the San Siro. So it's a great moment for him, but a bit of a shame perhaps that it didn't end up with all 3 points and that place in the history books.
Yeah.
The Slavia Prague, a very tough group. I mean, they had Barca as well, they had Dortmund in there. So for them to even take 2 points and for Olayinka to score the own goal against Barca and that victory in that draw against Inter, I think he deserves credit for making the best out of a very tricky situation.
Yes, I also want to highlight Olympiacos forward Youssef El Arabi from Morocco. He came up with the penalty goal against Spurs, some other good goals. I think against Red Star Belgrade, if I'm right. But just some of the, when you look through the African players who scored at a decent level throughout the competition, he is up there surprisingly.
Yeah, El Arabi, what an interesting player for his kind of collection of individual qualities, and what an interesting career as well. Kind of ducking between UAE. Often players when they go to the Gulf, it's kind of at the end of their careers, or if they go earlier in their careers, they can find it tricky to return to major leagues, major competition. But he's here must be approaching his mid-30s, still scoring goals in the Champions League for Olympiacos, having spent 4 years of his career in the Middle East. So that's that makes it all the more impressive achievement.
Do you know his nickname?
No, I said it's Nigerian strikers that's the speciality, not Moroccan strikers.
El Pistolero. It's his celebration also. When I was trying to record clips of his goals it was hard because he would run off to do his gun flicking celebration so early.
That was, of course, Stoichkov's nickname as well, El Pistolero.
Oh, really?
I like to think if I'd made it in the big leagues, my nickname would have been El Pistolero as well.
Well,
Maybe
maybe
Elvis.
if you Dovdinho might be better.
Well, Davao. I think we'd be much better. Big Dove. Don't be little Dove. You want to be Dovinho. You can be Malekinho if you want.
You can go on for a while.
Right, let's look. If I was playing for Nigeria and in the Champions League, I would be probably, let's face it, winning the Champions League Goal of the Tournament award most years, if not all. But who would you give it to from an African perspective this year when it comes to picking out that won the goal during the 2019-2020 campaign?
I'm going to have to say Jeffrey Kondogbia for his excellent goal against Lille. Just a screamer from 30 yards, hit it off the volley. I just don't really know how to describe it. It was excellent on all levels. Typical screamer that goes at the end of the goal of the tournament celebration. Do you agree?
Certainly up there. That was a game, of course, where I think Victor Osimhen scored his second Champions League goal. I obviously like to go back to the theme of Nigerian strikers. But I'm not sure I would give that as my African goal of the tournament. For me, it's particularly taking in context as well and significance, I would probably go for that Maxwell Cornet finish against Man City, taking in what it meant for Lyon, what it meant in the context of that match. That goal was stunning. It was breathtaking. It was an awesome finish. Obviously helped by Edison coming so far out of his goal, but Cornet still had so much to do, and to finish, to demonstrate that kind of composure and that kind of sang-froid in such a intense moment, I just found quite incredible. And added into that as well, he's typically a right winger who's been remodeled as a left back, so he's playing out of position, he's bursting forward, he's on his, I guess, favoured foot, but not the way he typically uses it, cutting inside. And to kind of finish so blindly like that, but with such aplomb, was it was a great moment, and that would get the nod for me.
Yeah, great player, obviously, playing under Rudy Garcia. They have a nice African project there at Lyon. But I did just remember Hakim Ziyech had two absurd goals in the Champions League. First against Chelsea, went off the post, hit Kepa in the face and went in. And then he had a similar goal from a similar position against Valencia, just curved in beautifully. Those are definitely some that will go under the radar due to his move to Chelsea. But I wanted to bring light to those.
On the subject of Ziyech, I think it might be time to move to our perhaps biggest category, which is the African player of the tournament. Before we start looking forward to next season, let's one final look at the 29-20 campaign, the African players who stood out for you, and ultimately which African player has impressed us the most. Who makes your shortlist here?
Honestly, I'm undecided who to give the final gong to as the best player, but some of the players I shortlisted were Hakim Ziyech, Houssem Aouar, Riyad Mahrez, not to highlight too many North Africans, but Mohamed Salah as well. But maybe you can give some sub-Saharan Africans the credit they deserve.
You named Salah in your disappointment category, so you can't now name Salah in your best player category. So he's automatically disqualified because
He's a prolific scorer. You have to think about him.
Well, you can't really call him prolific after 4 goals in the whole really. Okay, so Salah's disqualified. Let's forget him. I would also add in Thomas Partey to that as well. I think nothing spectacular like the other guys, but actually it's in this era, this isn't the era of Mikel and Essien and Yaya Toure anymore. And to actually have a West African, sub-Saharan African midfielder playing such a key role at such a major European club at the business end of competitions, I think is actually he deserves immense credit for that. And it's not a surprise anymore. Partey isn't kind of wet behind the ears and kind of coming into this team and playing his part here and there. He is now a key building block of this Atletico team, and it is to his credit that under one of the great managers of this era, and one of, in his day, a great midfielder, Partey has actually become such a key figure. And he was missed so much in that defeat by Leipzig in the quarterfinals. And I think that game, that loss, and Atletico's lack of control in midfield was testament to just how important Partey is for them.
Definitely. I feel like we're going to forget him out a bit when he hopefully inevitably moves to Arsenal. But he had definitely some great performances. A very consistent player overall. Would you throw Percy Tau up there for his short-lived group stage heroics?
No, I think the three North Africans you said, I think Ziyech, Mahrez, and Aouar, I think really it's between those three. I think Mahrez, had he continued the form he showed earlier in the tournament during the knockouts, I think he could have really. This season for Mahrez, I think, is a tricky one because he's actually been pretty excellent, really. But he's never going to get any credit for it because they've won the League Cup and they flopped in the league, they flopped in the FA Cup, they flopped in the Champions League. But actually, he's really settled into life as a player at a major club very, very effectively. And
do you mean that he's settled in well as a backup player?
No, I don't mean as a backup player. No, I mean as a one of several rotation options at City. And I think it is very disappointing that Guardiola appeared to lose faith in him for the big games at the end of the campaign. Obviously, he struggled against Arsenal in that FA Cup. No, he struggled in the FA Cup match, and then he didn't start against Lyon when I really thought that actually had City given reins to some of their more creative players and actually taken the game to Lyon a bit more rather than respecting their opponents as much as they seem to, it could have been a different story.
Interesting. Well, I want to highlight Aouar, though. I feel like he's one of those players that could win Best Young Player or Breakout Player and Best Player just due to the fact that I wouldn't say he led Lyon, but he took them to the semifinals, which is such an impressive feat, which no one else in this list can say, can they? Ziyech couldn't make it past the group stage, and Mahrez wasn't a star player, a starting level player for City. So, if you wanted to, I could argue you have to disqualify those two for that and give it to Aouar, but I'll let you put your last point in.
Yeah, he was impressive against. Obviously, he's getting a lot of attention for that performance against City, but he really impressed me in the group stage games against the victory at home against Benfica and the victory against Leipzig. I think it was a draw maybe against Leipzig at home, 2-2 draw. Controlled it well. I think as well as you mentioned Ziyech, he scored twice. He got 4 assists. Obviously, Ajax's run was briefer, but I think in terms of concentrated excellence in the games in which he played, and you mentioned his goals before, I think Ziyech was the player who most impressed me. Although obviously he doesn't have another run to the semi-final to show for it.
So if we have to pick on one together, who's your pick?
Probably Choupo-Moting.
Wow, that really caught me off guard, and I might have to agree with you. I was leaning towards Aouar, but like I said at the beginning of the podcast, just those goals leading and getting them to the semifinal, which allowed them to make the final.
If that is the criteria, if it is all about who scores the most goals to get teams to semi-finals, then I think it's got to be Choupo-Moting for that winner against Atalanta. Sure. He missed a big moment in the final, but he'll be dining out on that quarterfinal goal for years and years and years to come.
Hopefully, for his sake. I'm not too sure considering they didn't win. Had they won, or even had he scored in the final, he would have become even more of a cult hero, but unfortunately, he did not get the chance. I want to give it to Aouar, but we've talked a lot about Ligue 1 today, to be fair. It would be wrong to give it to Choupo-Moting as the best player of the tournament, though, wouldn't it?
I think, for me, most impressive would be Ziyech. That would be my vote.
I can agree with that. That he, as the most impressive player, he gets it.
Okay. With Choupo-Moting as runner-up.
In terms of scenes, Choupo-Moting wins, but...
Yeah, but when he came on as a sub against Galatasaray as well in the group stage, he did really catch the eye with some good touches.
All right. Well, on that note, we'll move on to looking at some players next season.
Yes.
I wanted to bring up Demba Ba playing.
So these are the African players who we are excited about watching in next year's Champions League. So we don't know exactly who's going to be in there because there are some teams still to qualify, but we are looking at only the teams who are in the running or those who have definitely qualified already. So you want to start off with Demba Ba?
Yeah, well, they won the Turkish league.
Try and get me excited about a player whose best years were about 5 years ago.
Oh boy! All right. Oh, my other player was Kamavinga, who hasn't had his best years before him.
No, I want to get some hype for Demba Ba. I think we should give him a little bit of credit for what he's done in Super League with Istanbul Başakşehir, and
he scored some great goals last season, so I'm excited to see him on the big stage in the Champions League.
He did, and he's got experience, and he can be lethal. He's still very athletic. I mean, he's still going to be a real handful. Do you think he's someone who can fire that team out of the group stage?
I haven't watched a lot of the Turkish Super League, to be honest, and when it is, it's mainly the traditional bigger clubs. So I'm really interested to see what they have. They have a lot of interesting players, a lot of Brazilians. Gil Clichy, I believe, is still there. So I'll definitely try and watch them whenever they come on. But in terms of coming out of the group stage, I doubt it. And I don't think Ba is able to do that at his age currently.
And you mentioned Kamavinga. So let's look at Rennes because they are quite a great story, actually. I mean, quite an organic project, finished third in Ligue 1, and they're going to be back in the Champions League. Kamavinga, I think, had it been maybe a normal non-coronavirus summer, we might have seen him move on to Real Madrid. But obviously, football economics being what they are in 2020, he's going to still be with Rennes in the Champions League next season. Just 17, a remarkable talent. What are the key things you're excited about seeing from him next year?
I'm just shocked. He's my age, and he's close. He's on the cusp to move to Real Madrid. He's just so impressive with everything he does. Like I remember when he came on to the scene last season with a great performance against PSG. Everyone caught the eye, and while he hasn't been able to show it consistently, playing very often across the season, or hopefully he will this season, but I think he'll be able to show his skills. He has a lot of flair. Hopefully he will show out to represent Angola. I'm not sure if that will happen, but I'm looking forward to that potential.
He could also represent Congo-Brazzaville as well, I think. So.
Oh, really?
Yeah. It'll be interesting to see a tussle between Angola and Congo-Brazzaville to see who actually gets hold of him in the future. Assuming
I think it'll be a Cold War. France will just snatch him.
Yeah, well, we'll see.
But also at Rennes.
Not just Kamavinga at Rennes as well, of course. Yeah. There is Nayef Aguerd, who we talked about last week, who's making the move from Dijon. A player who was playing in the Moroccan Bottela just 2.5 years ago. So that's been maybe, he was there just before the World Cup. So just 2.5 years ago, he was still there. So that's going to be fascinating to see a player making the move from the Moroccan top flight to the Champions League in such a relatively short space of time.
Definitely.
Also, Wei Niang as well, a player of whom such great things were expected as a youngster. He's not the player we were hoping for, but he has settled into being a very useful and at times very effective Ligue 1 forward. He is, a bit like Ba, a nightmare to play against. He can go in behind. He can battle with defenders. He can win the ball, and he's a bit. It's not very refined at times, perhaps. But actually, in Europe, a player like that can be a real nightmare for defenders to play against.
Yeah,
he got 10 goals last season, and I think that's about his level now. I think between 10 and 15 goals a season in Ligue 1 is what we should be expecting.
Definitely. At 6'2", it's hard to be great on the ball. You rarely see that many players at that height who are technically that gifted. But the fact that he played at AC Milan, sorry,
Choupo-Moting, the Cameroonian Zlatan, he's 6'2" and he's very nimble with the ball at his feet.
He did not show that in the Champions League, if what I've heard is correct, in the final. But
final was a bad moment for him. But everyone, even Davao had some bad games.
Is Choupo-Moting Nigerian now? Am I missing something?
Olakunle Choupo-Moting, yeah.
Well, back to Niang. He will not represent Nigeria anytime soon. He was close to representing France. He played for them at the youth level before representing Senegal. But the fact that he played in Milan a few years ago was incredible. He was with them contractually until 2018. So, like you say,
incredible. I think it's a bit of a mess, to be honest. I mean, had he stayed at Caen, had he had he kind of grown steadily in Liga and then got a move, I think it would have been. I think we could be looking at a different player. But the fact that he moved to AC, the 2012-2013 season, I think he played 20 times in Serie A, didn't score, and it was always going. I think it was always going to be tricky for him to kind of.
He was 18.
No, it's far too young, in my opinion, for a player to be a player for him specifically, but almost any player at 18 to be kind of leading the line for a Milan team in transition, having come from Caen, like a sleepy Normandy town, to be thrust into the Rossoneri. I think that was always going to be. I just think it was a poor move for him, and he's taken his time to recover from that.
All right. Who are you looking forward to seeing next season?
So a few players we've already talked about. Hakimi at Inter Milan. It's going to be a different prospect. I'm hoping that under Conte's formation, 3-4-3, playing on the right side, with their experience in the Europa League this season, I'm hoping that they're going to be a threat and that he will thrive. Also, the Salzburg boys, Mwepu and Daka, it's going to be very, very, very hard for them to juggle their domestic responsibilities, the demands of the Austrian Bundesliga with the Champions League, but hopefully they can do it. And also a shout out for Jeremy Frimpong of Celtic, Dutch Ghanaian defender. He scored on the opening day of the Scottish Premier League season, and they're playing Ferencváros of Hungary in the league route playoff. And hopefully it'll be good to see Celtic back in Europe, and it'll be good to see what Frimpong can do against both going forward and both defensively against some of Europe's biggest sides.
Definitely. Have you looked at any of the Eastern European or North African sides that will be playing in the group stages next season?
Well, a lot of them are still to qualify because a lot of them come through the champions and the non-champions route. But we are going to have, I think, who's confirmed. I think Dynamo Zagreb are definitely in there. But apart from that, I'm not sure. I'm not sure which other teams are already guaranteed. Obviously, you're going to have Shakhtar back in there. Russia will be represented through Zenit. But I think everyone else is still fighting for their spots.
Yeah. One team that is in the qualifying rounds right now is FK Tirana, who are managed by former Super Eagles goalie Emmanuel Egbo. So if he can manage them to the group stages, that would be such an impressive feat after he won the league last season in his debut.
Yeah, they did well seeing off Dynamo Tbilisi in the previous round, but I fear that Red Star Belgrade will be a step too far for them in the Champions playoff. But we'll have to see.
That's a very tough matchup, but I don't know about Serbia's coronavirus rules, but maybe if they don't have the fans, they'll be less of a force. There's lots to look out for in the Champions League next season, especially in the playoffs that are happening this week. So be on the lookout for that. But thank you for watching. This was our UEFA Champions League review and a little bit of a preview for next season. Thank you for coming on, Ed.
Pleasure, as ever.
And we will see you next week. Thank you for listening. Okay. Stop recording.